Hey, so I got an email from somebody asking if I'd do a video about atypical anorexia. Like, yes, actually. I have quite a lot to say about that. But first of all, I'll read her email. So she says, can you do a video on atypical anorexia? Got a couple of questions. Question one, it is described as having the same characteristics of anorexia nervosa, except for one of the two criteria, such as low body weight BMI, loss of menstrual cycle, for example. In my case, I've lost my period about 3 years ago, and I restricted for some time, but I was never underweight for my height and age. So could I even consider myself as having anorexia? Question two, even without knowing the answer to the question above, I've been trying to recover, already gained quite a bit of weight, and I've experienced extreme hunger very often. And I guess I'm eating more than X amount of calories a day. Stop counting for recovery purposes. But my period is still nowhere to be seen, and I'm afraid to get too fat. Do you have any advice regarding this atypical anorexia? How should I deal with the binges and the fears? Well, first of all, so there's a number of things that I disagree with in the eating disorder field, and so one of those is the DSM criteria for anorexia. I think it was written with the best intentions, but written by people who had been trained to view anorexia and what many of us now consider to be a really stereotypical and not actually particularly correct, or at least not extensive view, complete view of what anorexia is. And so I think, so the DSM has got, this is what anorexia is, somebody has to meet these criteria. And then a lot of people have been saying, well, actually, this person is exhibiting all of the behaviours of having anorexia. They just may not have reached this, I don't know, and it's usually the weight criteria. They may not have reached this certain weight. And that's because for a really long time, it was viewed that for a person to have anorexia, they had to get to a super low weight. And now I think that most people in the treatment field, I hope, know that that's not true, and that a person can have an eating disorder at any size. And that a person can also be restricting foods and in energy deficit and in malnutrition at any size body if they are at a body weight that is lower than the weight that they would be naturally if they're suppressing their natural body weight. And really, that guideline of what anorexia is didn't take body diversity into it. It only saw, a person with anorexia would have started in probably a medium-sized body and got themselves into a very underweight body, not understanding that actually a lot of people with anorexia start in a larger-sized body and get themselves into a medium-sized body, not a very underweight-sized body. A lot of people with anorexia are restricting heavily, but their body weight didn't change much at all. But they're still in malnutrition because their body just adapted and didn't continue to lower weight but lowered metabolism. So it's actually a lot more complicated than necessarily a person with anorexia gets to a low weight, and the DSM just hasn't caught up with that. And I know it seems crazy and you think that there should be this one thing that helps everybody out, but it's just not there. We don't really have, I don't think, a good enough consensus of what anorexia is. And we've got so much stigma and stereotypes out there that have influenced that. And the people that write the diagnostic criteria are not immune to that stuff. They're not. And it's a problem because a lot of the research actually now that goes on to, say, research into anorexia is done on people who have been diagnosed with typical anorexia. So we're missing all of that body diversity genetics and experiences, even in the research, which means that the research is only done on people who are in the typical anorexia criteria. And so therefore it's just fulfilling itself. And so we need to make a bit of a noise about this. Atypical anorexia is not atypical anorexia, it's anorexia. And so I think really to the person that wrote those questions, it's going to really help you. You have anorexia. It doesn't matter if you didn't get to a super low weight. It doesn't matter if your period didn't go away. I mean, God, like not everybody loses their period when they have an eating disorder, and some people do. And it's just all of these criteria are far more trouble than they're worth. If we could just look at behavioural, mental state signs and symptoms of an eating disorder and restriction, for crying out loud, which is, I think, that's the major thing, isn't it? Restriction, body weight suppression by purging, exercise, whatever it is. leads to weird stuff, basically. So atypical anorexia, I don't think it's a thing. I think it's just anorexia. And I think that all that's happened there is that at some point people have begun to realise, like, oh, shit, we forgot about body diversity when we wrote this damn thing. It happens. Let's redo it, eh? Let's rewrite that thing. Just scrub out the atypical bit. Just all scrub out the weight criteria for anorexia and some of the other things. And we might have a chance at getting more healthcare professionals that read that DSM criteria to understand that a person can be restricting food and a person can have malnutrition and a person can be in energy deficit and a person can have an eating disorder at any size. Thanks and goodbye.